Okay, so you might know that Argentina's current president, Javier Milei, is somewhat unusual. He's an anarcho-capitalist, which means that he wants to literally abolish the state and have the market run everything. He has a bunch of dogs that are clones of his old dead dog, and he's named them after famous economists. He's now in charge of a country with terrible inflation, trying to bring that down while doing really weird dances and complaining about leftists.
¿Por qué le pones de mierda, digamos?
Porque son una mierda.
So, how did the country that gave us Messi and ballpoint pens get here? Well, it's a long story, so get ready for a ride. Contrary to popular belief, Argentina was not always miserable. In fact, at the turn of the 20th century, it was one of the richest countries on the planet, with its GDP per capita coming close to that of the United States. And then its economy collapsed. And Argentina was never really restored to its former glory. This is why economists sometimes quip that there are 4 types of economies: developed economies, developing economies, Japan, and Argentina. Alright, let's go back to explaining what happened. In 1930, we saw the beginning of Argentina's infamous decade, where then President of Argentina was overthrown in a military and low-key fascist coup. For the next 13 years, the country underwent major upheaval and political repressions, with extremely conservative governments committing electoral fraud to maintain power. And though the government was sort of pro-market, it was also extremely corrupt and destroyed the country's institutions. Because, you know, that's what happens when you go through a military coup. Eventually, people, meaning the military, got sick of the conservative governments ruling the country, and another coup took place. One of the figures behind this coup was Colonel Juan Perón. We're gonna mention him a lot going forward. Perón went through several political positions in the post-coup government, but most importantly, he was Secretary of Labor and Social Welfare. During this time, he implemented a social security program, tightened labor market regulations, and pursued a lot of popular left-wing reforms. This made him an immensely popular politician because he became loved by labor unions and the working class. Naturally, rival military officers tried to have him arrested, but after huge demonstrations, Perón was let go and coasted to the presidency in 1946. Oh boy, if you thought having a fascist coup, 13 years of electoral fraud, and another coup was bad, then wait till you hear about the age of Peronism. Yes, Peronism. Perón was so popular that they named a whole ideological movement after him. His presidency was marked largely by the same policies he enacted before. More economic populism, he nationalized industries with the goal of favoring the working class. He wanted to reduce dependency on foreign goods and started a policy of import substitution, which, by the way, never goes well. And he kept intervening in labor markets to help workers. And he also started to censor the press, spread a shit ton of propaganda, create a cult of personality, and get inflation. By 1951, consumer prices had quadrupled. That's extremely bad for any country. But even better, Perón somehow got into a fistfight with the Catholic Church. As we all know, the only reason the Pope isn't a Mortal Kombat character is because he'd be way too OP. Naturally, this resulted in, you guessed it, another military coup. Perón fought against the rebellion for a few days, but realized he had no chance of winning and fled the country. He eventually ended up in Spain, where he would live happily ever after. Okay, here's a brief rundown of what happened after Perón is deposed. You have a military government. The military government holds elections. Some sort of moderate party wins the elections. They get overthrown in a military coup in 1962. Elections are held in 1963. Some guy is elected. There's another coup in 1966. A new guy comes into power and stays there until some weird internal military coup happens in 1973. People get really bored of this coup stuff, so they're like, I wonder what Perón is up to. So he comes back from exile in Spain, becomes president again in 1973, and dies in a year. Huh, you thought he would get couped again, didn't you? Well, no, because that instead happened to his successor in 1976. The military government after the 1970 coup was especially repressive and started torturing and killing dissidents, so people got really sick of it and Argentina eventually returned to democracy in 1983. Since then, the country has had multiple attempts to fix its economic woes, but they've all failed. The problem is that decades of violent coups and repression have destroyed Argentina's political and social institutions. It was especially bad because elected leaders such as Perón generally tended to be economically populist, meaning that the pro-market bunch were the insane fascists in the military. This meant that there was no decent path forward for Argentina. Either you had a repressive military regime, or you'd have some stupid socialist rule you and get overthrown by a repressive military regime in 2 years. This is how one of the most prosperous countries in the early 1900s went backwards in all ways and became the world's one and only undeveloping nation. This video was made possible with help from the University of Georgia, bringing quality education to Georgia and beyond.